everyone. Welcome back to the Let Us Fly podcast. I'm Gio.
I'm Jordan.
And we have two special guests here with us today. We have Tamora Davis and we have Riz, who's our producer. And we're going to be talking about what life is like for them navigating through a male-dominated world and what we can do better as men for that conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and let's get into it.
Today we are going to be talking about women in a man's world, or more specifically, women in male-dominated spaces. I think it was only right that we bring guests on here to talk about it, seeing as though we are two men, and these things may not be as apparent to us. But I know this is something that may or may not affect you guys on your day-to-day, or has affected you in the past, or is something that you see as a problem in your future. So I guess my first question for you guys is, have you guys experienced any problems in a space that was more male-dominated? Do you have any anecdotal stories, any specific examples?
Yes. So pretty much every space is a male-dominated space. That's like the reality. Right. And you definitely get a lot of, there's like the usual comments, side eyes, that kind of stuff. Like maybe a backhanded compliment followed up with for a girl, something like that. That stuff's been starting since you were little. And then, I don't know if y'all really want to go there, but there's also like hypersexualization of women everywhere you go, regardless of the space, even in professional settings, of course. But yeah, it's everywhere. Like that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would kind of relate back to what she says, but like a more like personal note, have I ever experienced it? No, not really. But like generally, I get what she's saying, so I would agree.
Well, I know as a man myself, I've been in spaces where it's evident that it's a male-dominated space and women are viewed as inferior when it comes to either the ranking in that respected space or it just in terms of like just being a person in that male-dominated space.
No, I definitely agree with that. One thing I want to touch on was you just mentioned, Riz, was the hypersexualization aspect.
Yeah.
That is something that I wasn't acutely aware of in high school, but I think as we come to college and, you know, you're exposed to more ideas, you know, those things start to become more apparent.
Yeah.
But I know some guys, there might not be a thing for them. They might not come to that realization. Yeah.
You think about how scary that is. I mean, the fact that it's most of the college community, pretty much everywhere, I would say. But of course, I can only speak for Columbus State. That's definitely the case for most of the community. They don't realize, or maybe they do and they just don't care, that they are technically, I don't know how to say it without sounding problematic. They're inherently taught that they are the superior gender.
Yeah.
Air quotes for those who are listening.
Yeah.
So they present themselves that way. And it's really, really, it can be intimidating for most women. Personally, I'm not intimidated by it because you can see right through it most of the time. But there are women that definitely are. And they feel threatened in certain spaces, like just simply by walking down the street. I know a lot of people who avoid walking downtown at all because they don't want to get catcalled or harassed or followed home. Like, you can't go after a certain period of time or once it gets dark because you're more than likely going to get followed or, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
That's the sad reality of it, too.
I was just about to say, I hate that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I was going to say, okay, men, not all men. But
Right.
Just to go through that as a woman, or even just like as a little girl, like girls are sexualized at an early age.
Yeah.
Like when you're asked when you're little, like, oh, when are you going to get a boyfriend?
Yeah.
Or, like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Really
when do you
Why
plan on
do you do
being
that?
married? Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
And I feel like it dates back to like men were seen as like the kings, and I mean some women were seen as queens as well. But every man, they were just, I guess, put on a pedestal just because they were a man and they were seen as the superior gender in that sense. So I feel like that kind of trickled down throughout time, and it's still happening today, but it's just in a different form.
So you think that's where that inherent aspect comes from? It's just been taught for generations and generations.
Like tradition.
Yeah. I have a question for you two, though, Gio and Jordan.
Yeah.
How are you guys taught to interact with and look out for women growing up, or were you taught that at all?
Yeah, for me, it was definitely like, it was more or less you treat a woman like a rose, like a delicate rose. And, as a kid, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm taught to love women, which I feel like that was probably the first, like, red flag that, hey, you need to like women and that's it,
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother thing. But that women are delicate and we are there to protect them. It was never like we're equals, we're on the same level, partners in that aspect. Yeah. But that was definitely the case for me and how, my family chose to raise me.
Do you think that changed after, or are you still?
It was I did change, but it definitely wasn't, from their doing. Like I said, it was definitely like meeting people and getting exposed to ideas that were more or less what I wanted to start thinking like. I think that's where I got to where I am now, Yeah.
I'll say for me, because I was raised by mostly women, and my mom, my aunt, and my grandma were three, excluding like my sister and whatnot, were like the three, I guess, figureheads in my life growing up. I was taught like, this has something to do with it, but like as soon as you go into a room, you greet everybody that's in the room, regardless if you came there for them or it's just a thing of respect. I was always taught to hold the door open for a lady, help them out if I see them like struggling or whatever the case is, just like little tiny things like that. That's how I was raised. And when it comes to now, like with me having like such a big respect for the three big women in my life, it's just molded me to treat other women that same exact way, because the way how I kind of look at it as I wouldn't want somebody to treat my mom like that, so why would I treat somebody like that? I could definitely get with that one right there.
I was gonna say, okay, what do you guys like? What are y'all's opinion on if you meet a woman and she's like, I guess has that like independent like trait about her, and like, oh, she doesn't need a man, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Like, what do you guys think about that?
I love that. I love that. That's definitely like it's something that my mind is compatible with. But it's also like that inherent type of thing growing up. Sometimes I do catch myself like, well, I would assume like, or let's say I assume a woman she would want me to open up the door for her. Some women don't want that, and that's a position where it's like kind of awkward for me, because I don't know, like, well, should I like, well, obviously saying she doesn't want me to do it, but still like I feel like that's what I've been taught as a kid, you know what I'm saying? So it's definitely something that is like, it's a give and take in that aspect.
Yeah. And then I was gonna say, okay, like if she's like, I guess too independent, then I guess like as a man, how would you guys feel as if, oh, okay, well, she's doing everything herself, like then what am I here for, type thing. And I feel like not a lot of women, but some women today, like, they're just like, oh, I don't need a man for anything. I can just do this by myself. But, like, at the end of the day, girl, let somebody take care of you.
Yeah.
Like, you put all that weight on yourself.
I can kind of speak on that, because I used to be that way, where I was like, I don't need anyone's help. I don't want any man to do anything for me. Like, get out of my face. I don't need you. And a lot of that came because I was really, like, a lot of the men in my life had disappointed me. Right. And so I was being super defensive, and I got very used to being defensive. So naturally, I had to learn how to take care of myself, like emotionally speaking. Right. And so then whenever I would come in contact with a man in that way, and it would get to that level where he would want to take care of me, I would immediately deflect and be like, no, I don't need that. Right. Like, it was just it was never a good mix. Right.
Same.
And I had to force myself to learn how to let someone do things for me. And
right.
It's still a struggle, but it's much better than it was.
Yes, it's a learning process for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, when you're so defensive all the time, I can say, like, I've really had to, like, open that, like, feminine side, let somebody, take care of me.
Like, almost soften up a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's necessary for, like, every relationship, It's like a pendulum. But, on the other side of that, like, as two males, how are you supposed to interact in a world where she doesn't want to be super independent? She much rather go the traditional route, even though you've been told all these things. Well, kind of subverting that traditional approach and, you know, be understanding that women are equal in that respect.
Right.
What if you have someone that, you know, much rather prefers those traditional aspects of a relationship? Because that's where I feel like it's like a moral quandary, or not a moral quandary, but like
you're saying, if you are
it gets
wanting someone
contradictory.
who wants that,
No,
or if you meet someone who does,
If you meet someone who does,
and
yeah.
you don't have the same like viewpoint.
Like you can't give that. Is that what you're saying?
If that's what they're asking for, but like you like, you know, we're always talking about like female empowerment and
Right.
like and all these things, but then like let's say there's a female that comes around and she wants the more traditional aspects of a relationship, even though this is what is being presented to you on social media and, you know, all these other avenues of information. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what just came in my head. So, like, for example, like on social media with all of these couples and the media that you have now, I guess the quote unquote norm for showing your significant other that you appreciate them is by materialistic things, right? And there's, you know, certain women who want like just materialistic things to kind of fill that void of, okay, well, that's love to me. And there's other women who want like the actual like emotional stuff, like being able to coddle me while I'm in bed, you know, things of that nature. But what came to mind is if you have a guy who I guess has never been exposed to that, like, for example, if you have a woman that came to a guy and said, you know, I want you to cuddle me in bed. Maybe that guy doesn't know how to because he's never been through that and he's never had that experience before.
Right.
So she wants that traditional love, but he doesn't have that to give to her. So
Honestly, I feel like that just comes down to like love languages.
I was
Yeah,
just about
How
to
you
say
express
that.
your love, yeah, because everybody's different in that way. Somebody might only understand love as giving gifts because that's what their family did or something. So when
Right.
they have a partner, that's how they feel the most appreciated. But if you can't communicate or like learn how to love your partner, right? They want to be loved.
Yeah.
That's a you problem, and that's a communication problem. I don't know. It's
For
sure.
complicated.
But I
empower
can-
them in
Yeah,
in
I
some
can
way.
see what Gio is saying. How like today is like, oh, if he don't buy me this, that, and the third, then
Yeah, that's true.
yeah,
Nice to know that.
Not a birthday.
And social
But-
media doesn't help either.
At
for
all.
real. Oh my goodness, like I feel like social media has just gotten to a point where it's just like you're letting Instagram tell you how your boyfriend should love you, but like at the same time, you're not even learning how to love him. If that
Or
makes sense.
yourself.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. So I just feel like just to X out of all that, you know, social media stuff and just actually try to sit down and learn your partner and learn what they like and stuff.
Right.
So
This just turned into a relationship forum.
Right. So let's
I'm here for it.
Yeah, it really did. But to kind of shift gears a little bit.
I was literally about to say the same exact thing.
So like just to shift gears, when it comes to, you know, women in male dominated, you know, spaces, what comes to mind is, you know, as it relates to, you know, sports, you have like Venus and Serena Williams, who are
We stand.
absolutely like those are two women who are not that there's not other successful women in, you know, sports, but those are kind of the two, I guess, gold names that kind of pop up if you're thinking about a woman in sports. And then if you shift it to music,
Yeah.
hip hop,
yeah,
you
for
have
sure.
like all of the, well, hip hop everybody knows is a male dominated field in itself. So you have like people like Lauryn Hill, Lil' Kim, Nicki Minaj, Cardi B, all these other, you know, big female names who have really monopolized hip hop in their own right. It's like once you, and it's so crazy because weren't we having a conversation?
Yes, we literally had this
Yeah, we
conversation.
had a conversation, for the last episode. But once you think about like a woman's resume, like a woman can have twice the resume as a man,
Right.
but the man will be seen in a higher light than the woman, if that makes sense. And I just don't know why that is.
I feel like that dates all the way back to like
That's exactly what I was just
what's her
gonna
name?
say.
Like Rosie. That you know what I'm talking about? you know?
yeah.
Yeah. Let's get it. What?
You talking about Popeye?
No.
I don't know what it's called.
The poster where she has like the red bandana
Yeah.
and she's like
Oh,
encouraging
like
women to
the-
go back to work or something like that. Yeah.
I feel like that dates
Rosie
all
the
the way back
Riveter.
then. Because you know, like women
What are
back
y'all
then.
talking about right
Rosie
now?
Okay.
the Riveter? You know what
Yeah.
that is?
She's kissing her.
Oh my gosh.
Jordan,
I'm
where's
gonna
your
man kissed
history?
it like I was gonna
Where is Jordan's
figure it
history?
out.
pay attention in history?
Yeah.
Bro, I'm a history buff. That's a crazy thing.
Oh my God.
Hold on.
You know,
I'm
like
gonna-
women back then were just supposed to be like stay at home. Like they weren't supposed to work.
Yeah.
So like, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so why did, like, even in that case, why is it not women go to war, you know, women fight the same as men instead of women go to the factories and make the stuff for the men, you know?
Because they still viewed them as delicate. They see men as more capable inherently. Men are taught that they are more capable since birth, so of course people are going to believe it and then pass that on to different people in society. And so then when two people apply for a job, even now, the man is 9 times out of 10 going to get the job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it just made me think of another example. So I don't know if y'all remember. I think this was back in, like 2016, 2017, 2018. It was that whole Monique situation with Netflix. Y'all remember that?
No,
I
what
kind of
happened?
know what you're talking about.
Okay, so just to kind of...
Oh, yeah, you showed me that. Yeah.
So you have somebody who is really the top female comedian. And you have, you know, other big male comedians like, you know, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, and all these other, you know, big male comedians. When it came down to, I guess, who would have gotten the bigger deal, the men got the bigger deal, even though the woman had the more extensive resume. So when it comes down to, I guess, women in male-dominated fields, how do you kind of like appreciate? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, how do you kind of like appreciate, I guess, their legacy of what they've done if they always have like a microscope under them?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Men or
it makes
women
sense in my
have
head.
the microscope?
Hmm?
Men or women?
Women.
He's talking about in terms of them receiving the same amount of attention.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Microscope as in small, and these men are being put on like radio, television broadcast, you know.
Oh, okay.
In comparison.
Like we're doing the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question for y'all. So as, you know, growing women in...
Not growing.
Oh my God.
Flourishing women.
Flourishing, yes.
Edit that.
As flourishing flowers.
So
You'll be a woman now.
So as flourishing women in your respected fields, which is sociology and communication. So do you guys ever think like that you guys would be in a space or you guys would be in an area where you would be looked at as the lesser gender when it comes to your fields?
For me, it kind of like, I don't know, I guess it would vary. Because like with sociology, it's like the study of people.
Right.
So I guess it kind of would go back to tradition and like, the way a woman thinks is quote unquote different from like the way a man thinks.
Right.
And so like depending on whatever job field you want to go into. So say like if I wanted to do like counseling. So all my thoughts would be, I guess, from like a women's perspective.
Right.
So I don't know if like everyone would see the same, but I would have to learn how to get like what's it called, like a middle ground.
Okay. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But just to like, I guess that specific profession.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I experience that now, I would say.
Really?
Especially as a producer, yeah.
Sure.
I talk to a lot of people. When I talk to men specifically, and they're like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a podcast producer. And they're like, oh, okay. So like, what kind of podcast do you produce? And then I tell them, and they're like, what exactly do you do though? Do you just like talk on the microphone? Like that seems pretty easy or something like that.
Right.
And then I explain everything I do. And this happened like last week. Someone responded with, oh, wow, so you actually really do know what you're doing then. And I was like, why?
I hate when
why
they try to
wouldn't I?
downplay.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
And they
why
try
wouldn't
to
I?
chip every single thing.
Right.
Oh, well,
And
like,
yeah, like asking a bunch of questions about little things to see if I would know. And I was like, I'm so sure that I could do this so
Yeah.
much better than you.
oh
but I'm
my
not even
gosh.
gonna,
You know what that made me think of? Judge, I don't want to butcher her name. Ketanji.
Yes.
Ketanji. You
Yeah.
seen that?
Oh my, yeah.
With the
When they were
going
questioning
after her.
And I just like that just made me think of that because like the questions they were asking weren't even relevant.
Foolish questions.
And then because she's like a woman, and then plus she's a black woman in that
Yeah.
field, and so it relates back to what she was saying.
That's a good example.
Yeah, it really is.
So how do we start keeping the patriarchy accountable for their actions?
Call them out every single time you see, hear, or notice something.
Yeah.
Because subtlety obviously isn't working.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say just calling them out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And not even, you don't have to be rude about it. Just be like, hey, that wasn't cool.
I was watching some video on Twitter, I think it was like 2 days ago, and this person brought up the example of I think one of her friends works in like she works like for like multiple different high maximum
High maximum.
Or
Maximum security.
High maximum security.
the high maximum
High maximum security.
So, as I said, she's a woman, so she's dealing with like inmates on a daily who have like a criminal record and this, that, and the third.
Wait, inmates have criminal records? I'm sorry.
They're giving a lot of redundant information right now.
Oh my God! I'm just trying to get my thoughts together.
Talking. Gio, I don't think sometimes Gio hears himself talk.
I know what I'm trying to say. Oh my God.
Go ahead.
Okay, so she has to, I guess, put on like a persona that like she's not tolerating any any BS or anything like that. She has to be like a very tough thing.
Yeah.
And some of the inmates will kind of try to flirt with her to get her to break down that barrier, as opposed to if you have like a male like I guess lawyer in a sense who's going into that prison, it's like they're kind of more intimidated by them in that sense. And I feel like it's weird that if you're a woman in a high position in law enforcement, you're either looked at as A, you can't do your job correctly, B, you probably did some inappropriate things to get to the position that you're in, or 3, you just don't know what you're doing at all and you're just like in a position.
You did kind of touch on something, which is that the fact that she had to put on I'm not to say she's not a serious person or she gives off that serious type of energy on the daily,
right?
But there should be no reason why you have to put up a front in the workplace.
Yeah.
Women should be able to be themselves in the workplace and still be successful. At the end of the day, there's no reason why they should have to put on a front. Men don't do it every day. They act crazy. They say ridiculous things.
Right.
It may be subtle, but they say ridiculous things in the workplace. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's a very antiquated thought.
That kind of reminds me. I had a friend. She works. I was really about to out her. Never mind. She works at a bank, and she was telling me about how if she didn't wear makeup to work, and if she didn't keep her hair at a certain length, none of the men would take her seriously at the job. Like they wouldn't acknowledge her. They wouldn't give her certain projects to work on.
Wow.
They wouldn't come to her if they needed questions or something like that.
Yeah.
They would literally avoid her because of the way that she looks if they didn't meet their standard.
Yeah.
What?
Isn't that crazy?
So crazy.
I would quit in a heartbeat.
Goodness.
That is so messed up.
Yeah.
So let me ask both of you guys a question, Tamora and Riz. If you guys know that you guys are about to enter a male-dominated field or a male-dominated space, do you look at it as intimidation or do you look at it as competitive?
Just like any field?
Any field, any space?
Intimidate or like
Motivate.
being competitive?
Or what did you say? It was like intimidate
like intimidation or competitiveness?
Yeah.
For me, it wouldn't. I don't think it would be intimidating, but I honestly don't think it would be like competitive either. I guess like I would just have to see in that moment, if that makes sense. I can't really judge it based off of, because honestly, I really don't even know what I'm gonna do. So like, if I had like my career line, then I could probably answer it better. But I mean, I kind of have like a little just.
Well, what about fictitiously? Let's say you were in a space that was severely male dominated. Would that intimidate you, or would that, motivate you and give you like a competitive?
I feel like it would be both.
Yeah,
like at first, I may seem like a little bit intimidated, maybe like a lot of bit. I mean, depending on the field, but I would just use it as motivation to, like go harder. Like maybe you could be like the first woman doing this or whatever,
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of the same, but
Okay.
I don't think either. Like it definitely wouldn't intimidate me. I've told y'all this before, but my daycare when I was little was a barbershop. So I'm not afraid of a room full of random men. Like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna mind my business. You're gonna mind yours. It's gonna be fine. But
Right.
I'm also not a super competitive person, and since I know, no offense, men are kind of extra. I don't think I would waste my time trying to compete with them. I would just try and do my own thing and like worry about myself.
Right, like if you know you got, like, I know what
Yeah,
you're saying.
if I got to this job, I'm obviously qualified, so I'm not about to compete with you for a position I already have.
Right.
Got you.
Well, I have a question for you, Tamora.
Oh, okay.
How are you taught to interact with women? I know a lot of women are like taught to see other women as competition. And it's kind of interesting to see how it all plays out like once you grow up, because you kind of still have that same mindset, and it can be hard to make friends as women and as girls. So what was that like for you growing up?
For me, I feel like I didn't really see anyone as my competition, I guess, because it's just like, what is there to, you know, like compete,
Right.
I guess. But I can get why, like, some women do that, because some women even have like trouble making friends because they feel like, oh, if she has this certain type of job or like her lifestyle, they feel like they're in competition with them. But honestly, like, you can just, you know, they can just be your friend at the end of the day. Like, you guys don't have to compete. So yeah, I don't think that was a problem for me, I guess. I won't say problem, but I don't think that was something that I had to like encounter.
Okay.
What about you?
Kind of the same. I would say my school environment definitely tried to pit everybody against each other, specifically women. But like outside of that, we were taught to just accept people as they were, and like I said, mind your business. My family was very big on that. But at school, we were taught the opposite, so it was kind of hard to have those conflicting feelings. And so for a while, it was hard to make friends, but I kind of just had to get over it once I moved to a city where I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
I just had to start talking to people.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a big thing too, like moving away from home and like just getting out of your comfort zone.
Well, there's one thing that whenever I'm having this conversation, always like comes to my mind, and it's this thought of growing up, and this may not be true, but how many of the decisions that you guys made in like middle school or high school, how many of those decisions were more or less based off of what other girls thought guys would think, or what guys thought, period?
You need like an example. I guess
Like something you wear, or like
Yeah.
someone you might talk to or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
In high school, that was definitely prevalent because, I mean, you're surrounded with the same people every day. So, like, I guess eventually you start to worry about what they think because you got to see them all the time. But
Yeah.
kind of the same as the other one. Like, I grew out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, I would say the same thing. Like at that age, I feel like for any like high school girl or teen girl, you're gonna always want to like feel like you're included, I guess. Like you want to, you know. But as you get older, you realize none of that even, you know, mattered.
Yeah.
So.
Well, do you think that's to do with like the whole of like society and like a middle school, high school terms, like that population, or is that more or less the pressure that men have put upon you at those specific times?
Probably both. I would say because of the pressure that men have put on women in the past, maybe those women passed it down to their children who passed it down to theirs, and then we all ended up in high school together. So then it kind of circulates like that through the boys and the girls that are in high school and middle school. So it's just one of those things that gets passed down through generations depending on how everyone else was taught to view men and women. And, you know, every generation before us was taught kind of like what y'all were saying in the beginning, like men are the head of the household, women come next, that, and like so on and so forth.
I was saying I would agree. I was listening, like trying to process.
I would say to, you know, just to kind of, you know, wrap up everything in a little bow, I would say as a man, I do and I speak, well, I don't speak on behalf of all men because, you know, yikes. But I do want to say that for all the women listening, I respect you very much. You are loved, you are cared for, you are beautiful, and nobody has told you that already. Don't view a male-dominated space as intimidating, even though it sometimes can be intimidating. But if you know that you have the work and the skill set and the resume to back that up, in a sense, not necessarily view that as competitive, but think of it as, well, I'm just playing with the boys too. Don't think of it as, well, you know, I'm just like a little puppy dog and I'm playing with like all the Rottweilers and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my little tidbit. Thank
Good
you.
advice.
That's my TED Talk.
Good advice.
No, I would definitely agree with that. Like Gio said, can't speak for every man out there. Definitely not trying to. But I think guys like us, and hopefully that can turn into the male population as a whole, as long as we are understanding and we're there to empower women and view them as equals, we can start turning some of these darker notes into, something that can be appreciated and loved,
Thank you guys for the encouraging words, and thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you. Here.